Alright, today we are on episode 53 of the Planet Zoo Experience, and we are discussing the European badger. Very interesting choice in animal this time around, solely for the fact that there are a few different badger species that could be used in this game. With the American badger and the probably most famous honey badger, most likely being something people would have expected, the European badger is still a very good choice. Seems how they are the largest species of badger, based on actual size, not weight. They are also one of the more stand-outish of the animal species, with the American badger being a little bit more dull, and we'll get to their differences a little bit later on, but let's discuss what we're doing in the exhibit before I get too far into it. So we are going to be making a divot exhibit, and with this we are going to make a much more mellow example of an environment than we may usually see. Now, the animal being a burrowing species, I will be doing something a little interesting when it comes to the actual layout of the zoo, and we'll get into that when we arrive. But, as for the animal in question, the European badger, or scientifically known as Meles meles, which is just the Latin word for badger twice, another one of those absolutely phenomenal nomenclatures that we've come to see many a times before, can be found in every European nation, as well as Lebanon, Syria, Iran, Iraq, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan. They will weigh somewhere between 15 and 29 pounds and live in massive burrow systems. Usually they'll live in multiple family groups in one system and have been known to allow other animals to reside in there for a time. Now, these burrow systems are massive. I have found, ever since looking into these animals, not just the badger, but the animals for the series, that if it burrows, it most likely has a massive range that they will use. And the European badger is no exception. It seems that their burrows can go anywhere from 115 to 266 feet long, and of course will have multiple entrances and exits. Now, while the European badger is a very iconic animal, it does kind of confuse me onto why it was chosen for the DLC pack it was, which seems to be a trend with most of the animals in the European Animals pack, but I'm sure there's a reason, but to be completely honest, I don't understand why. I feel like there are better animals to choose and better animals to take its place, but that's beside the point. Getting back to the tunnel systems, as you can see, we're making a small mound in the center of this divot, and that's going to be the main den for where we're going to be keeping our animals. We're also going to be adding small burrows in the outer ends of the divot. So we're going to extend the fence, the invisible fence, all the way around so that they can travel through there and you won't end up getting the game yelling at you for escaped animals. Now, the badger is an omnivorous species, which will commonly eat earthworms, insects, carrion, tubers, and cereal grasses. However, they have been known to eat other smaller animals, lizards, mice, other things like that. But for the most part, they are pretty passive when it comes to how they eat. Historically speaking, the European badger most likely separated from the Asian badger roughly 1.8 million years ago, most likely in the regions of Central Asia, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, and whatnot, moving further into Europe as time went on. Now, there isn't too much evolutionary history for this animal, just for the mere fact of I can't find out where the first badger came from. I do know there have been other badger species throughout history, but I didn't feel there was anything overly important to note. So we're just going to jump straight into its influence with people. Culturally speaking, the badger has a lot of interesting traits that you can find all across Europe. For instance, in Irish mythology, they were seen as shapeshifters and were known to be the kinsman Tadg, king of Tadahil. And in German mythology, they were seen as a species that was very peaceful, loving, and were very connected to home, family, and comfort. And once we get out of the other forms of local folklore and mythology, you could see the badger in plenty of cultural aspects. For instance, it is usually a staple character in many 20th century books, including, but not limited to, The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame, The Tale of Mr. Todd by Bateau Potter, and The Prince Caspian by C.S. Lewis. And those are just big names. Those aren't including just average, everyday kids' books that you may find at your local store. Now, of course, there's no way I could go without saying this. They were also the coat of arms for House Hufflepuff in the Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. Now, they are also in a lot of heraldry and other symbols outside of just those made for stories. For instance, they were in the coat of arms for Luhanka, Finland, which uses the animal due to its prolific pelt hunting done in the area, which ends up getting to the next point. When it comes to their influence in more modern, I say modern, this is still old stuff, but more modern history, the European badger was usually hunted for its pelt, while there are some regions of northern and eastern Europe that do consume badger. For the most part, most peoples don't, and that's simply for the fact of their, as I've said with many, their diet. Being an omnivorous animal means they're essentially eating trash, and eating trash makes the meat taste bad, not to mention the fact that it is a mustelid, aka a weasel species, which would also give it a very stringy and not very texturally good feeling when you ate it. So, it is mostly hunted for its pelt. Now, what are these pelts usually used for? Well, that depends on where you go. For instance, in Scotland, the pelt was used for the sporrans in the Scottish Highland dress. More commonly, however, badger fur was often used for brushes, whether it be paint or just your average dusting brush. The coarseness of their fur was really good for that job. Oh, and we also can't forget the lovely piece of internet history of badger. Alright, I'll stop. Don't worry, I'm not going to just do the whole thing, but you know what I mean. Now, let's get into the difference between the European and the American badger. Many people may not realize that they are different, but let me first give you a side-by-side and you may be able to see some of the differences. If you haven't, let me break it down for you. Starting off with the length. European badgers, they'll be anywhere from 25 to 45 inches long, while the American would be 20 to 30. When it comes to weight, as I said before, 20 to 40 pounds for the European. The American, again, 20 to 30. Very interesting, same pounds to length. Wonder if there's a ratio for American badgers. When it comes to European badgers, they have two distinct black strips that start at the ear and come down in a triangular fashion toward the eyes, while the American badger is much more grayish brown and will have two vertical stripes that are at the cheek in between the eye and the ear, and will have a white stripe that goes all the way down its spine. European badgers are omnivorous, as I've stated, While the American, while is omnivorous, is much more carnivoran and will hunt much more frequently than the European badger. European badgers are more social, having multiple families in one den, and have been, as I said, shown to share their den in certain circumstances. The American badger, however, is not. They are far more territorial and do not get along with many other animals. One notable exception, however, is the fact that the American badgers have in fact been seen hunting alongside coyotes. Coyotes are much faster, so if their prey, like let's say a groundhog, tries to hightail it over the prairie, the coyote will chase it down, pin it, the end of that. If it attempts to run back into the burrow, the badger is able to dig after it with its powerful claws. While that's a lot of information we throw on the American badger in this video, I really like that tidbit, so I figured I'd throw it in since we probably won't be getting an American badger in the game. And when it comes to the territorialness, as I've stated with the American badger, they're not a fan of people, or, quite honestly, most creatures, while the European badger had actually had some success in domestication. Again, some is the key word. There's plenty of... You really shouldn't just attempt to find a wild badger and make it your pet. It probably won't work out for you. But with all that said and done, our exhibit is finished, and I believe it is time to wrap this up. So, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, share, and subscribe. If there's anything else you would like to know about the next animal, like the European fallow deer, please feel free to throw those suggestions into the comments. I'm still, even after a year plus making this series, I'm still trying to figure out the best way to format and display information that people may be interested in. So, until next time, go outside, touch grass, hug your loved ones, and bye-bye.